So there's been several big moves made the last couple of days as far as the NFL goes. Head coaching vacancies, coordinator vacancies, etc., etc. And one certainty you would think in the NFL universe would be if you are considered the greatest of all time in any aspect, whether it's player, coordinator, head coach, GM, etc., that finding a job would be easy. But as we're all seeing and realizing very quickly, that's not necessarily true. We saw it in 2020 when Tom Brady became a free agent that he only really had three suitors at the end of the day: Chargers, Niners, and Bucks. And even all his accolades and all his greatness, it showed that the age or the lack of long term commitment or whatever it might be scared away potential suitors. And now we're seeing it with his counterpart and partner for 2 decades, Bill Belichick. Um, we've heard news of interviews with the Falcons. We've heard news with potential interest from other teams, and it's all seemed to, as the days and hours and weeks dwindle down, Belichick is still without a job, and that's something that I really never thought would happen. I myself thought it would be a very similar situation to Andy Reid, in which Philadelphia let Andy Reid go, and the Chiefs picked him up quite quickly afterwards and wasted really no time in deciding that that was going to be their next guy. So you might ask yourself, why? Why is it that a guy with the reputation and a resume like Belichick is having any issue at all is finding somebody, let alone finding, a team that's willing to just say yes? You would think somebody with his resume would have half the league, especially with all the openings and vacancies we had this year. You would think that there would be many teams that would be jumping over themselves to get somebody like that. So it does beg the question of why? Why is it suddenly a struggle for somebody that great to find a job? And ultimately, it boils down to me about the lack of commitment that you will get from Belichick. Sure, if a team wants to win now and maybe change the face of a team for a year or two, that might be the team that's trying to dive into a Bill Belichick and know that the philosophy and culture around the team can be changed for success for a couple of years. But when you're 72 years old, it's hard to convince an entire organization, a GM, an owner, and all of them that they should lay everything on the table, change their entire face of their franchise, and commit to the Patriot way, if you will, for a guy that might only last a year, maybe two. Maybe he decides to call it quits, after one season, and, whatever it might be. So, when you really think about it, that has to be what it is that's causing such a controversy and such a lack of interest from the league. Is that why would you be willing to change everything about your team, everything about your culture, and, you know, everything that goes with that for a guy that is of the age that he is, and you can't commit your entire future, your franchise to him? Plus, the other side of that argument as well is, have you seen the last 3 years without Brady? The Patriots have not been the same team. And it really begs the question of, was it always just Brady? Was Brady the key to the success? Were the Patriot offenses always this mediocre and Brady was just so great that he overcame it? Or is it really just the fact that between Cam Newton and Matt Jones, they just haven't hit on a quarterback? I can see both sides of that argument. Matt Jones has shown very little flashes of being a good quarterback, but he's also shown flashes of just being average. I certainly wouldn't call him a bust, but he certainly hasn't shown what they expected out of him. Um, Now, you could say that it was an unfair expectation from the beginning, that maybe following up Tom Brady more or less is a pretty high standard to have to live up to. But at the end of the day, it certainly wasn't what they were expecting. And so when you look at the absolute terrible output that the offense has put out for the last 1, 2, 4 seasons now, actually, um, it makes you question that too. Because sure, Bill Belichick's going to get your defense right. There's not a team out there that wouldn't take him just for the defensive side of the football. But what is he going to bring you offensively? And you also know that Bill Belichick is a creature of habit. Guys like McDaniels, guys like Matt Patricia, guys like Bill O'Brien, these are guys that have came and went more than once back and forth to Bill Belichick's regime, and he continues to allow them back in. So it makes you think that as well. Is Belichick going to be open to interviewing new offensive coordinators, or maybe taking one that's already there and willing to have that collaboration? Or is he going to want to have a very, hey, I like my guys, I like my way, I'm going to bring in guys that I know work and, you know, don't interfere with the way I want to do things? Um, so you have to think about that part of it as well. And so ultimately, that culmination and those ingredients is why we're running into a situation where one of the greatest coaches of any sport of all time is struggling to find a job. Um, and it's disappointing to see, because he is very close to breaking the all-time wins record. Um, Prior to Brady leaving, it would have probably, a lot of people probably would have expected it to have already happened, considering he was like 40 something wins maybe when Brady left. Now he's down to 19 or 20, I think it is, shy of the all-time win record. But the way that the Patriots have been the last couple of years, and the questions around Belichick, that could be a 3-season thing. So if that's ultimately why he wants to continue coaching, is to beat that record, which is really the last record that he would have to overcome, the commitment might be longer than what even he's expecting. Because he's not exactly been shelling out 13 or 14 win seasons these last few years. And at least personally, I haven't seen anything that has shown me that he's suddenly going to be able to do that. Because the teams out there that have rosters that are built for a 13 win season aren't exactly looking for a head coach. So it's going to be quite intriguing. The spots that were open have really just completely shut down. As of the time of recording this, I think there might be one. Let's see, the Raiders just got their guy. The Commanders just announced that they're getting Ben Johnson. So, without going through everything in my head right now, and obviously there's still some people that might be let go of once the smoke clears on the season, but the way that it's looking, there might be one job left by the time he's done. There's still a couple teams out there that I can't say I'm certain are going to stay with who they have. But normally by this time of the season, the teams that were going to move on from their guy have done it already, because they want to be in the run for the new candidates that are going to be open. So, it's crazy to say, but we might have just went through an entire coaching carousel, an entire coach cycle, and the greatest coach of all time didn't get picked. He was the one left at the end of the team captain picks in a basketball pickup game, and that's absolutely wild to think about. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. To me, it's going to be interesting to see if he's willing to continue coaching at all, or if he's going to take an entire year off. Is this a situation where he's willing to be humbled and take a defensive coordinator job somewhere and maybe just settle in for a year? Or is it something where if he's not going to be a head coach, he's not going to coach at all? So in the next coming weeks to a month, it's going to be really interesting to see kind of what happens with Belichick. Um, One of the other big announcements that came across actually today, about an hour ago, is the Eagles signing Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. Um, as an Eagles fan, I don't really know how I feel about this one. Moore had some success with Dallas. At one point, they had the number one offense in the NFL. I want to say that was 2021. And then over the last 2 years, we've kind of seen his offensive style not really mesh well and succeed the way that it previously was with Dallas, and then this past year with Los Angeles and with the Chargers. He had the number 18 ranked offense as far as yardage goes and 21 in points. And that's not really what you want out of a team that has the weapons like Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen. Um, you would hope for and expect more out of that. The one thing that he does bring the Eagles, which they didn't really have at all this past year, is he has an identity, and he has a philosophy. So you know that the offense is going to be going in one direction. This year with Brian Johnson over the helm for the most part, and I'm sure a little bit of Sirianni mixed in, it the identity of the offense kind of felt unstable, and it definitely towards the end of the year it kind of really fell apart, and they didn't really know whether they wanted to be that powerful run team that they were at the beginning of the year when they were the number one run offense in the league, or they didn't know if they wanted to rely on Jalen Hurts to make the plays and win the games. It really turned into this just jumbled mess of uncertainty when it came to the Eagles offense. So that is the one benefit, in my opinion, that we're going to get out of Kellen Moore, is that you're definitely going to see an identity. You're going to know pretty early on in the season and in the preseason and as the year goes on, hey, is this team going to be a powerful run team? Is this team going to be a spread team? We've seen a kind of a mix of what Kellen likes to do in the past, but I'll be interested to see with the Eagles' weapons, which they do have plenty of them. I'll be very interested to see kind of what he does and what kind of game plan we come out with. Keeping my expectations low to start with, but it can't really get any worse than it was this past year. So, and at the same with this staying with the Eagles, they also announced a couple days ago now that Vic Fangio was hired as defensive coordinator. This is a move that I do like a lot. Miami had a pretty solid defense for a good portion of this year. Things kind of started to fall apart towards the end of the year, but I'm still not sure if that's more on Fangio's defense or if it's just a Mike McDaniel thing. So far, in just a short amount of time, Mike McDaniel's teams have shown that they don't really stack up very well against good teams and teams with winning records. So I don't know if that's a preparedness thing and something that should be a detriment to the head coach, or if you can take it for the whole thing. But I do think Fangio has shown a pretty good resume over the past with the teams he's played with and coached with. So it's going to be fun and interesting to see. I am excited about that. I think he'll breathe fresh air into a defense that definitely needs it. And just like I said with Kellen Moore, you can't really get any worse than what the Eagles were this past year. So, and the last thing I guess to touch on is just going to be congratulating more or less the coaches that have found their jobs in the past week. We'll start with Raheem Morris in Atlanta. I'm actually really excited to see Raheem Morris get another opportunity. His stint with the Bucs is so long ago. Hired all the way back in 2009, I think it was his first year with Tampa. And at the time, he was the youngest head coach in the league, if you believe that or not. So I think he had 3 years there before eventually getting the boot. And then they went through the ringer with Greg Schiano, Dirk Cutter, and then eventually led to Bruce Arians and them. But it's I'm glad to see him get a shot. I actually, a couple years ago when Atlanta decided to fire Dan Quinn and he took over as interim, I was hoping for him to retain the job then, but unfortunately that didn't happen. but he went to Los Angeles and did a great job with the Rams over the past couple of years, and so I'm excited to see him get an opportunity. And it's going to be cool to see what Atlanta can do this year in a division that still is not that strong, and I think that it's anybody's division. So, and the Falcons shown a lot of promise this year and a lot of opportunity. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do with that team. I touched on it a couple minutes ago. Ben Johnson, kind of unofficially announced that he's going to be taking over Washington once the Lions season's over. And what he's done with that Lions offense over the past couple of years has been pretty awesome. Last year, his name was a big one in the running for head coach opportunities, and he himself said he wanted to finish what they started in Detroit. So hopefully for his sake and Detroit's sake that he can finish it out the right way and win a Lombardi this year. But either way, that's another great signing. I think that Washington's offense really needs that kind of head coach to come in and a guy that can, I mean, I don't want to use the same terminology, but breathe fresh air into that team. It's a roster that still needs some help. McLaurin's getting older, and he's showing some signs of age. They do have a couple decent running backs, but Antonio Gibson's going to be gone, it looks like. And Sam Howell, I mean, he definitely showed some promise. Whether or not they decide to stick with him or use their high draft pick to get a quarterback, that remains to be seen. A lot of that's going to rest on the shoulders of what the Bears do with the number one pick. So, and then let me see if there's anybody else out there off the top of my head that deserves it. Carolina, I am terribly sorry. I don't remember the guy's name who they just signed. The OC for Tampa Bay. This is the one signing that I don't really like. That's why I haven't even really looked into the name enough to really mention it. I don't even know why I mentioned it here, to be honest. But I don't really like this hiring for Carolina. This is a team that I think really needs that splash. They need that big name coach to come in and change the culture and change the identity of the team. And unfortunately, I mean, Tampa had a solid offense this year, but I wouldn't have said that it was impressive enough to me to warrant a head coach job. Obviously, I'm not connected to the team or anything, so I don't know that for sure. But I don't. This is one that's made me scratch my head. Most of the head coach signings that have happened this offseason, I've agreed with to one level or another. But this is one that when it happened, I thought, really, like, Carolina couldn't have done better. Interesting, especially with, like, aforementioned Belichick's out there. Now, I don't know if Belichick had any interest in Carolina. He might have taken a look at the team the last few years and said, I don't want any part of that. But in a division that, as I just mentioned a second ago, is still kind of wide open, I feel like this is a team that, with the right coach, they could have put themselves in contention year one potentially, just for that division at the very least, because the last 2 years it's been won by 9 wins or less. So I mean, apologies to the guy whose name I can't remember, but this is a signing that I think 2 years maybe from now we'll be looking back at and going, yeah, not really the right guy for the job. Now, by all means, I could be wrong. A lot of people said the same thing about Nick Sirianni when the Eagles signed him off of Indianapolis. And then 2 years after that, he had the Eagles in the Super Bowl. So, and 3 years after that, he's had 3 playoff berths. So, to each their own. Maybe this is a good signing by Carolina, but that remains to be seen, and I guess we'll see about that later. And I'll finish things off with the Michigan news. So, as I touched on in my previous video, Sharon Moore was kind of the expected head coach signing that would happen there, and they did officially announce it yesterday. Congratulations to Sharon. I'm not going to tread on everything I said in the previous video, but it'll be interesting to see kind of how it goes the next couple weeks to a month to see which players he can retain. see who decides to transfer out, if anybody. But it's gonna be an interesting team to watch next year. Ohio State has put a lot of effort in to the last couple weeks of signing guys, getting guys transferred, putting a lot of effort and money into essentially, in my opinion, beating Michigan. The trends would tell you that Michigan's trending down and Ohio State's trending up. All your preseason polls and everything over the next couple months will probably show Ohio State favored to be a better team than Michigan, if not win the whole Big Ten. So it's going to be interesting to see who Michigan can hold on to, what Sharon can do with these recruits that Harbaugh brought in, and what that team looks like overall next year. But that's pretty much all I got for you guys today. Thanks for tuning in. Push all the important buttons and tell your friends and all that good stuff. And I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.